Hey guys, Rob here, and today you join me for episode 39 of How It Was Made. This is my Lamborghini Countach LP400S. Now this is the base model. This is made by Kyosho or Alcia. This is a sealed die cast model, and I've got some parts I'm going to be using. This is an Auto Art front bumper bar and some resin flares from a GT Spirit model. These wheels are also from a GT Spirit model. First, I disassembled the model into all its separate parts, and the first thing I'll tackle is making this newer style front bumper bar, front spoiler fit the die cast body. So that required a little bit of trimming off the bottom to make the bumper bar fit. Now these resin flares came off a GT Spirit model that was heavily damaged due to some Zero Paints paint stripper. So before I threw the body in the bin, I cut these resin flares off. Now they sort of fit the body, but not exactly, so there's going to be a little bit of work to make those fit. As you can see there, the shape is pretty correct, but the fitment is not real good, especially the rear flares. Now I did order some rear fender flares from an Auto Art model and the new engine lid as well. Here you can see the GT Spirit flare does not fit the body at all, but this is the Auto Art rear fender flare, and as you can see, it's an almost direct fit. Now the 400S also has this revised engine lid compared to the LP400. On this Kyosho model, the engine lid is actually a separate piece, so I just removed that and custom fit the Auto Art piece. The rear valance was then glued into the body, and I trimmed some of the plastic floor of the model so that I could fit the floor in and out while that rear valance was glued on. I then positioned the side skirts and marked out where the flares should go, and then I super glued those onto the body. Again, really good fit, and it shows how close the Kyosho and the Auto Art models are, as the flares are almost interchangeable. Now the rear engine lid was filed slightly to make it fit, and the front flares were also sanded a little bit more and glued onto the body. Now as you can see here, the front spoiler is actually too long, so I measured the Kyosho LP5000S model that I have in the collection, and the rear spoiler is actually shorter than the Auto Art version, so I just cut a little bit out of it and rejoined it together to mate up to my front resin flare. Next thing I did was mix up some Tamiya 2-part epoxy putty to fill in the indentation in the roof scoop, and also the Auto Art rear engine lid was slightly wider than the Kyosho body, so I added some filler there, and then I had to create the bottom sections of the new fender flares, which I just shaped out of Tamiya putty. Next thing, I sanded all that putty to get those fender flares to extend down the side sills. I got those pretty good. They will require a little bit more finessing, but that basically is the shape. The putty on the roof was sanded nice and flush with the roof as well, which deleted the periscopo dent in the roof, and also the rest of the filler was sanded to shape. I then used my X-Acto fine saw blade to cut the join in the side skirt between the top half and the bottom half of the flare. This enables the side skirts to be fitted after the interior is all put back in the model. I then added some primer to the model, and I'll be spraying it in this Tamiya colour of TS20 metallic green, as I couldn't find a colour code for these old Countaches. Now while that was drying, I just did some detail painting on the floor, just with some silver Tamiya paint. Just painted the bottom of the sump and the gearbox and transfer case. Next I decided to tackle the interior, so I stripped all the interior down. There's not that many pieces in this Kyosho model. I then wax and grease removed all the parts and sprayed them in white Tamiya primer. I then airbrushed Zero Paints Ferrari beige on all the pieces, and then I finished those off with a Tamiya flat clear just to take any shine away from the beige colour paint. I then hand painted the matte black vents and a couple of other little details on the interior. but I'm really happy with how the interior came out. I think it looks great in that colour. Now I'm going to try and replicate these Bravo wheels myself, so I'm going to be using this 5mm diameter aluminium tube, and that is going to create the telephone dial-like type wheels. I made a little wooden jig so I could cut all the little lengths of tubing. I then used my Dremel workstation and actually pilot drilled all the holes in the rims out so that the tube would fit. I then made these wooden jigs so that when I glued all the pieces of metal in, they finished at the same level. So they were just super glued in with a little bit extra glue just to fill the holes. And then I sanded on the Dremel press again the end of the tubes to make them all level, and then added a few liberal coats of primer to help smooth all the edges. And then I airbrushed them in Zero Paint's Gold Lotus 56B colour. When that was dry, I fitted the tyres, painted the lug nuts in silver, and then I also painted the body. I just sprayed it in the Tamiya TS20, and then when that was dry, after about 15-20 minutes, I coated the body in 2 coats of 2K Automotive Clear Coat to give it that super shine. Now you can actually spray 2K Clear straight over the top of Tamiya colours, as the Tamiya spray paints are actually a synthetic acrylic. I just started to do some paint outs here, and then I fitted the front lenses. Next I fitted the tail lights using micro scale crystal clear glue, as this is a non-fogging glue for clear parts. Then the side scoops were glued back on and the rear vents were glued into place also. I then glued all the windows in, again with micro scale crystal clear glue. Door trims were then glued inside the body, and then the dashboard was screwed in place. These are actually quite basic, these Kyosho models, and are very easy to pull apart and screw back together. The whole interior pan was then screwed back into the body, and the floor was screwed back in place also. Minimal trimming required here. And then the rear trim for the exhaust system was glued on, and the standard Kyosho muffler was glued back on. Then the side skirts were glued on as well with a little bit of super glue. And then my new custom wheels were glued onto the chassis as well. And a few other little bits and pieces like the windscreen wiper, the early style side mirrors were glued on. And I glued on a black window banner across the top of the window as well. I just made that out of black gloss decal sheet. And that was basically it. So this model I turned around in basically a couple of weeks. It was a very quick project just to see if I could actually do it to this Kyosho model. There's a couple of little areas on the model that I'm not completely happy with, so this will just basically be a little bit of a shelf filler of a model. But it was just a bit of a trial and error just to see if I could convert this old LP400 Countach into the 400S. So yeah, overall reasonably happy with how this turned out for only a couple of weeks work, and yeah, overall reasonably happy, but not too happy with some of the little areas on the model. But yeah, that is my LP400S conversion. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you're new to the channel, why not subscribe? Don't forget to smash that like button, and stay tuned, plenty more videos on the way. But until next time, thanks for watching Rob's Model Cars.